a little bit of time to talk about some diploma options for students with disabilities. There has been, okay. Yeah, it's difficult, like kind of sitting behind, and thank you very much, I appreciate it. Yeah, we don't have a clicker. Okay. There have been some similar presentations over the years, and there are some things that have changed recently with diploma options, and there is a lot more that's going to be coming on the horizon a few years down the road. However, I know that Dr. Tara Natras, our Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, gave a presentation to the board. I forgot if it was either in a work session or in an actual board meeting about a month ago, and even within the last month, some of the direction that the Department of Education is looking at with future diplomas is still a process and evolution. But for where we are right now, there are several current diplomas or other options for students who are exiting Arlington Public Schools. Advanced Studies Diploma, IB Diploma, which is often associated with Advanced Studies, Standard, Standard with Credit Accommodations, Modified Standard, Applied Studies, Advanced or Standard Technical Diploma, General Education Development Program, or GED, Certificate of Completion. These are some of the main different diploma or exiting options that students have. And I have a few talking points with each one of the ones. Advanced Studies Diploma is the most robust academic diploma that Arlington or the state offers at this time. It requires a greater number of credits in certain specific areas than a standard diploma, and it includes more. Sorry. It includes more verified credits, which are verified credits, and I'm assuming that probably many of the members of the group have at least some understanding what the terms mean. Please, if something I'm saying doesn't sound familiar, jump in and ask me for clarification. Verified credit means that there is a course that the student passes and it has an SOL exam with it. Some of the key things that also make advanced different than standard are requirement for world language, either 3 years of a language or 2 years of one language and 2 years of another. The standard diploma does not have a language requirement. Also, 4 years of math at Algebra 1 or above is one of the requirements for an advanced studies diploma. Those are some of the big distinctions between an advanced studies and a standard. Now, advanced studies diplomas do not necessarily mean that they all have to, the credits have to be filled with AP or IB or intensified courses. It really is the total number of courses in different credit areas and the verified credits by SOL exam. Thank you. For a standard diploma, there are slightly fewer credits, and there is no world language requirement, only 3 years of math, 3 years of science, 3 years of laboratory science, compared to the advanced studies diploma requires 4 years in all of those. There is a requirement for a sequential elective. It could be, say, for example, Art 1 and Art 2. Two things that might be in the same area that are building upon one another. There also is going to be a requirement in the future for a CTE certification. Many students get that by taking the WISE financial literacy test through their economics and personal finance class. Students can take AP and or IB courses within this, but there are fewer credits and fewer required SOL exams in order to meet this. The Advanced Studies Diploma is available for any student, and in fact, in recent years, through pushing and providing support with more rigorous coursework, the number of students in Arlington who have been earning Advanced Studies Diploma, students with disabilities in Arlington, it has been increasing little by little each year. Students earning either a standard or an Advanced Studies Diploma, if they have disabilities, it has been increasing. These are some, for most students, without disabilities, these are the two main diploma options that most students leave high school with. I would also add, I think this is an important point to talk about, is that diplomas don't recognize just what a student has done in high school. All of a student's learning from at home, pre-K, kindergarten, elementary, middle, and high school, all of the accumulation of learning builds into this. When a student is taking, like say, their 8th grade science SOL exam, okay, that 8th grade science SOL exam is not testing just what they took that year in 8th grade physical science. That 8th grade science SOL is testing all of the science learning that they have accumulated along the way. Same thing in high school, when the student takes an 11th grade reading or writing SOL exam, it's not just testing what they did in that 11th grade year, it's really testing the accumulation of learning that has been built up over time. So when a student graduates, there are a lot of steps along the way throughout all of the years that lead a student maybe in one direction, or some steps can lead a student to go into a different direction, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute later on. And standard diploma with credit accommodations became available either 2 or 3 years ago. It's fairly recent. It is a standard diploma for all intents and purposes, and when a student has their piece of paper that is the diploma that is given when they leave, it says standard diploma. The only place where we know that there are credit accommodations, that is in their transcript and in their school record and in their SOL record. Credit accommodations are available for students with an IEP, and this is one of the unique items where a student with a Section 504 plan could potentially also access this. There are two parts of the credit accommodations. The first one is, as was mentioned, the option for locally verified credit. Students without an IEP, basically any student, there has been an option for considering locally verified credits for science and social studies SOL exams. With the approval of the credit accommodations for students with disabilities, it adds the option of the locally verified credit beyond science and social studies to add reading, writing, and any of the math. Reading, writing, and math locally verified credits are not available to students who do not have an IEP or do not have a 504. We definitely emphasize the word may, like for example, the case carrier may apply for locally verified credits. The main criteria are that a student has to have taken an SOL exam at least twice. At least one of the 2 times they have to have scored 375 or higher, and there has to be evidence of interventions or opportunities for relearning along the way. A committee that starts, say if it's a science SOL exam, like say earth science for example, the countywide science supervisor and several teachers are part of a committee that would review all of the applications that come in from around the county to consider if a student should be awarded a locally verified credit. There is a form that a case carrier and a counselor would fill out that would indicate a student may have taken earth science SOL exam 4 times, for example, over a period of 2 years. And if there's evidence that a student has participated in remediation or interventions along the way, and they scored at least 375 at least one of the times, there's an application to say, we believe the student has learned much of this material and should be granted a locally verified credit. The committee will evaluate that. Very often this happens in the student's senior year when it's going to be making a determination that a student is preparing to graduate and they need, say, this science exam to count as one of their verified credits. Some of this has already been explained. There are a lot of regulations that we don't really create. They're created by the state. Are there any questions about that area right there? And Linda, I think you had questions about locally verified credit in general.
That whole policy, and I think waiting until senior year is waiting too late. If you've got a kid who really needs that credit for the geography exam, that's 4 years later. And you have a committee that's sort of supposedly looking at the grading book and possibly offering them an alternative exam. It's just too late at that point. to do it, it really needs to be immediate. You know, if they're taking the exam twice, really in the same month is typically how they do it. You know, you've got a summer school option, but at least in our experience, nobody's really offering any kind of remediation until they get to that 11th grade reading writing, which everybody has to pass even for the standard, you know, the diploma. So there's no remediation for geography, there's really no remediation for European history or American history. It's just not offered, and so, yeah, I found myself wondering, how many kids in the last year have actually gotten these verified credits, you know, students with disabilities? Because it just doesn't seem like a very workable policy. You know, part of it is sort of based on a portfolio, but who's gonna maintain the portfolio for 2 or 3 years? You know, our parents supposed to be keeping every piece of paper that comes home, because they don't know that. The teachers certainly aren't maintaining it, and I'm not sure how long the grade book is preserved, but, you know, the teachers know that they need to be preserving every little scrap of evidence the student might need to pass this verified credit process. So it strikes me that sort of waiting, and you're waiting until October of the senior year, so even if it's for the reading and writing, you're 5 to 7 months after they've actually taken the SOL, and which again, that's a lot of time to pass for students to be, you know, possibly subject to an additional test. So I would recommend this committee write to the board asking for substantial revisions to the policy to make it workable, and none of the things I'm suggesting are violate the state requirements. I know things like the 375, that's a state requirement. There's nothing in the state regulations that require you to wait to senior year. And in fact, I think they say you're supposed to do it sort of as soon as possible, as soon as the need is ascertained.
Let me just ask Donna.
And I wonder, like, if you have, if the way that we do it now is to wait till October of senior year before, I mean, how many kids no longer have an IEP? Like, that had an IEP all the way through like 10th grade, and then all of a sudden they couldn't reclassify for it, or dropped it, or found eligible, so now you're really screwed, because you can't even get this.
So, if a student, say, for example, received a locally verified credit for Algebra 1 SOL exam, that's for math, or for English, or for reading or writing, those locally verified credits are only available for students with an IEP or a 504 plan. So, say in 10th grade, if a student accessed an Algebra 1 locally verified credit, but then say in 11th grade or in 12th grade, the student was dismissed from special education, the locally verified credit for a math test would no longer exist, because it's not eligible. A student without an IEP is not eligible for a locally verified credit in math. So that creates a whole nother set of situation or problems if a student is accessing some of the credit accommodations and then becomes no longer identified. They would only be eligible for graduation requirements as a student without a disability, and these are not available for a student without a disability. I guess hopefully there would be very few situations that would happen like that. One of the things that could be available for a family is that at an eligibility team, a reevaluation meeting, if a school team says that students made great progress and maybe no longer requires an IEP, family always maintains the right to be able to not agree with that, and then the student would remain eligible indefinitely. And in a situation like that, that may be the best option for a family to exercise. And nothing can take that away from a family.
But I'm just saying that, you know, most of the people I do know, like by the time you're in high school, the IEPs, they're on your triennial, are trying to talk you out of it. And like, I don't think any of this part ever comes up in discussion.
So this should actually come up. That's a very good point. So in each IEP meeting, say while a student is in high school, if a student has not passed their SOL exams, but they have had something that has come in at least 375 or above.
But you don't even know that yet. You're not even at that point till your senior year is what I'm trying to say.
Well, if it's in 10th grade or 11th grade, or if a student took a high school credit course, like say if a student took algebra or geography in middle school, and they scored like say 380 on the SOL exam, in their 9th grade IEP meeting, it certainly should come up for a discussion about providing intervention, opportunity for a retake of that, SOL exam. And if there's a pattern of a student having not been able to meet 400 or above, and they've taken it several times and they've had access for a remediation, a discussion at the IEP meeting should happen, and that should be happening in 10th grade and 11th grade. The discussion about aiming for accessing locally verified credit, that discussion should be happening all the way along, not only at the end. I can say that from feedback from our Department of Instruction colleagues in math and science, etc., has been that if students are accessing remediation or intervention along the way, a student might have taken an exam and gotten 380, and then they work a little bit harder or gain some more, take it again 385. Sometimes, like maybe on the 4th or 5th administration, they can get to 400. Now, an IEP team needs to think carefully about this, because having multiple test administrations and getting a little bit more each time can be helpful. On the other hand, at a certain point, you get to say, this is becoming counterproductive in overkill with testing. And it's a discussion that a family should have with their case carrier and the school counselor to say, oh, we're very close. If you're at, like, say, 398 and you maybe missed it by like one question, and if you've analyzed like the score results and you know that the one question is in a certain strand area in math, and you know a little bit more intervention is going to get the kid over the hump, we would say that we might want to have a student continue striving to that. But if it's been the 9th time they've taken the test,
Right.
at some point a team has to decide enough is enough. And it's going to be different with every team. So I would say that it should be a discussion for a team to take. Each family's voice is an important part of that discussion. It is not uncommon for students to take an SOL exam twice. 3 times is not necessarily uncommon. To have a student taking a test 5 times, we're getting into the really unusual
Well, they're missing
area at that
content in their
point.
classes, because each one of these takes 3, 4, 5 hours
And
sometimes.
that's true too. So you want to think about a balance. And again, at the IEP team, they should be discussing, okay, when should we be looking at accessing a locally verified credit, if that's the route to go, or we should keep trying to get closer to 400. And there is no right or wrong answer. Each family and knowing their child, and of course in high school, we would be having a student participate in this discussion. The student's voice is important in that as well. In the end, if a student is accessing a standard diploma with credit accommodations is the official title, their diploma is going to say standard diploma. The with credit accommodations is not on the diploma.
But it's on the
So-
transcript.
What's on the transcript is going to be the SOL scores. That will be on the transcript. But I don't know that the phrase with credit accommodations is not some. That's uniquely special education, and we are not supposed to have things on a transcript that would be overtly identifiable about it regarding a disability. But the second part 2 about credit accommodations is beyond the SOL test. It allows for a slower pace of instruction, and having certain courses stretched out over a 2-year period, and the option for earning 2 credits for both courses. For example, Algebra 1 is typically the standard Algebra 1 course is a single period all year long. Algebra 1 can be done in a double period in 1 year that counts as 2 credits, or it can be used as a single period over 2 years and counting as 2 credits. Now, I have an asterisk up there because students without a disability can take the algebra block or can take Algebra 1 Part 1 and Part 2 over 2 years. Students without a disability would earn 1 math credit and 1 elective credit. Students who have a disability and are accessing credit with accommodations, they're able to get 2 math credits towards the standard diploma with credit accommodations. Biology Part 1 and 2, Earth Science Part 1 and 2, U.S. History Part 1 and 2. Those courses are offered over a 2-year stretched sequence. And the style with Algebra 1 Part 1 and Part 2 is that for Algebra 1 Part 1, half of the curriculum is taught 1 year, and then in the 2-year sequence, the second half of the curriculum is taught the second year. A lot of the work in Algebra 1 Part 1 is recycled or scaffolded all the way through the second year. So it's not like you just touched on something and never hit it again, because you need those earlier skills as you're building in the course. At the end of the second year, a student would take the Algebra 1 SOL exam. For biology, earth science, and US history, it's structured differently. That's structured where in the first year, a student would go through the entire curriculum, more or less at, I guess I would describe it at a surface level, with not as deep into the curriculum. In the second year, they go through it a second time, but they go through it much more deeply in certain areas, or they focus more on vocabulary that was not hit as heavily in the first time. We cannot do biology, earth science, and US history in a way of like half the curriculum in this year and the half the curriculum in the second year, because by the time they get the SOL exam, stuff that they did in September of the first year is like long gone. But they won't necessarily hit all of the same stuff again during the course of the whole 2-year sequence. So they go like all the way through once shallow, and then they go through a second time deeper in those 3 courses, and the SOL exam is given at the end of the second year. So, and students would earn 2 social studies credits or 2 laboratory science credits for the biology and earth science. Linda.
Are all high schools required to offer all of these 2-part courses?
So earth science was not available until this year. During the past 2 years, algebra, bio, and US history were available. My understanding is that earth science came online this year. And they should be available at all of the comprehensive high schools, Yorktown, Washington, Lee, and Wakefield. HB Woodlawn does some different things they uniquely available. If there was a student who was there who really required this, in theory, it should be available. I don't know that there's a student where it's been requested, but the 3 comprehensive high schools are supposed to have all of these options available, and my understanding is that they should, and I can try to answer.
I just wanted to clarify if I heard you right, back on the first part with Donna's scenario of the student in junior year doesn't have an IP anymore. If they had a verified math credit freshman or sophomore year, does that credit go away when the IEP disappears, or do they maintain the credit they earned via a verified credit when they had the IEP?
So
They're
this
just
question has,
no longer able to use verified
Right.
credits going forward.
this question has not come up before, but as I interpret the regulations for a student graduating, is that for graduating, if a student does not have an IEP or a 504 plan, they would not be eligible for standard diploma with credit accommodations. They would only be eligible for a standard diploma. And locally verified credits are only available for in math, reading, and writing. They're only available for students with disabilities. They are not available for a student without a disability. So if a student earned say 385, and they took algebra several times and they were awarded the locally verified credit earlier, it would not count as, the student would have to have 400 or above in order to have that.
Right, so it would essentially go away.
I
there's no
believe that it
reason-
would essentially go
So
away,
it would
would
seem
not.
it would come up in an IEP discussion that the student should not be released from an IEP, potentially they would not graduate because they would lose.
They're locally
To a
verified.
504, right? Is that
Or
what
if
that would be
in
covered?
this scenario.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like,
So that's
common.
why I suggested that I would not recommend a